Welcome to Astro Chat with Anne Sundell, Kimberly Williams, and Monica Anna. We are three professional astrologers living in three separate countries, coming together every new and full moon to share our 3 points of view on astrology. Whether you enjoy deep dives into the current transits or you are just beginning to learn about astrology for the first time, there is a place for you here. All that is required is an appreciation for astrology, along with a respect for the various traditions within it. So grab a mug of coffee, your favorite cup of tea, or any other beverage of your choice, and join us for a chat on the astrology of the next 2 weeks. All right, hi, and welcome back to another Astro Chat. Today it's myself and Monica Anna. Anne Sundell is not able to join us today, sadly, but she'll be back in 2 weeks, hopefully, when we're doing our next new moon. As we go through, if you are enjoying these chats, feel free to hit the buttons below to like, and if you want to subscribe, then YouTube will kindly let you know every time we post. As you know, we try to post the Saturdays before the new and the full moons, or as close to that as we can get. So today we're looking at the upcoming full moon in Pisces. And a universal time, that's approximately 10 a.m. Here in Texas and Central, that would be 5 a.m. on September 10th. Those over in England on British Standard Time will see it around 11, and of course in Finland at 1 p.m. We're looking at this moon being at 17 degrees of Pisces, 41 minutes if you want to be exact. And yeah, so I guess, Monica, why don't you take it away and talk to us about a Pisces lunation?
So, full moon, again, we are at the top of the lunation where the energies are bursting, when the light, obviously, of our luminaries is quite strong, because not only we're getting the sun during the day, but we're getting the sun reflection in the fullness of the moon during the night. So there is nowhere to hide. That's why the full moon is the perfect time for the shadow things to come out, because there is nowhere to hide from them. So Piscean full moon. Let's just start with Pisces. Pisces as a zodiac sign encompasses our unconscious, our dreams, our fantasies. It's one of those signs that is indicated by two fishes going in a different directions. And I really like that symbol for Pisces, because it talks about the same waters that both fishes swim in, but there might be two directions to look at. And for someone, the dream might be something that inspires them, might be something that they aspire to be, to do, to create. This is the dream of artists and creators in so many ways. I don't only mean creators as in creating art or music. I follow quite a few incredible creators of a beautiful dishes of food, and they are inspired as well, and they can bring those dreams from the Piscean, astral kind of realm, if you will. But also, the same fish can swim in the dreams or in the fantasy world, and the fantasy world is the world where maybe we escape. Maybe the way I think about the distinction between fantasy and dream, for me personally, and I know this probably is just a layer of semantic here, but when I think about those two, dreams are the one that are inspired us, that come to us at night, that wake us up, that we journal, and then we do something about it. They feed our soul, they nourish our souls, they expose us into collective, which sometimes can be scary. The fantasies are the places where we escape to. Fantasies are the worlds that we create when we struggle to face reality. Still the same dream world, and those two fishes swimming in two different directions. So on one hand, we can use the archetype of Pisces to dream big. And people throughout the history, they had a dream, to quote, an amazing person. And there's so many people that had that dream, whether it's creators, fashion people, musician, you know, they followed that something that it's really difficult to put in words. This is something that we were with Kimberly just talking before recording. Piscean world is difficult to put in words. This is the word when you go this and that and struggle. This is the world where when you wake up from the dream, you kind of know something was there and someone was chasing and there was like the treasure, but not quite sure because it's all a bit foggy, a bit mysterious, and a bit disappeared too quickly. So this is the beauty of Pisces, the inspiration between, you know, musical anthems, inspiration between work of arts, you know, and amazing poetry or literature, and so many other things. But it also is the realm where we escape to. It is a sign of escapism, of a drug, an addiction. You know, if we're going that kind of dark route, where we're trying to create the dreams because we do not want to be in reality, because our lives might be too difficult, too hard, and too painful to be in. And again, there is no judgment here. Sometimes we need escapism. Sometimes it's not about the dream. Sometimes you need escape just to cope with what's happening in your life. But when that becomes an addiction, when that becomes an answer to everything, that's when it becomes a problem. Like with everything, with Pisces, it's the excess. Again, Pisces ruled by Jupiter. It's the excess. If when we take something to that excessive point, it's when it's becoming an issue.
Too true. Too true. Yeah. As the ancient ruler, we do see that Jupiter can bring excess, but when Pisces is in balance and we're not in that excessiveness, as you mentioned, it's the two fish, right? And it's that vacillation. What I love about Pisces is it can pull us into one direction, but only so far, because if you look at that symbol, right, there's that line across that tether. So we can go a certain perhaps space into sadness or depression or melancholy, and then there's that tug to come back up into joy, into happiness, and we can only go so far, and there's that tug. And whatever emotion we're dealing with, it brings us into working with this polarity, as most of the mutable signs will do, right? There's always this, I have to experience both sides, I have to keep going back and forth. And so when it's in balance, I think it can help us to be more open, more flexible, more feeling that. I also think that Pisces, in addition to everything you mentioned about escape and escapism and fantasy and all of those things, that it's also about spirituality, not not the religion I choose or the dogma I follow. That's much more Jupiter's rulership of Sagittarius. Those are the tools, the faith I have that gets me in touch to something beyond. In Pisces, it is what is beyond, I think. And so there's
Yeah.
something here every year when we have this beautiful full moon in Pisces. I feel like it's a great time to open up and to connect with whatever it is that is beyond this physical material world, because that's where Pisces strength lives. It can struggle dealing with the everyday muggle world, but its strength is when I move beyond this world. When I'm in that space, I can connect to God, Goddess, all that is. I can connect to my higher self. You know, when we're allowing ourselves to just be in nature and have that inward wandering kind of experience, you have that sense of awe. And we don't maybe know what it's about, but Pisces can really put us in touch. So if you're having right now, I'm talking to a lot of people who have shared with me, you know, crisis of faith, or the tools that I'm using, I can't seem to get myself motivated to actually do them, to get out and do the meditation or whatever it is. This can be a great time to just move beyond that and connect with something larger than ourselves and remember the joy. All right. And maybe work backwards from there.
Yeah, I mean, Pisces is one of those archetypes that I find it's so all-encompassing that sometimes it's difficult to actually narrow down what is it that Pisces do. But I absolutely agree with everything you said, and that that sense of spirituality. I think this is very much connection to the collective, connection to something bigger. In Pisces, it's like we're losing the skin and everything becomes porous. We feel and sense everything,
Yeah.
which is why Pisces sometimes maybe create those world of fantasies or escape into, you know, the choice of escapism or escape route that you choose. Well, that was very very well put. Um, but we might do that because we feel so exposed that there is no separation between us and others. We're so like a sponge. We can feel and sense everything. You know, we can feel the joy of people around us, of our tribe, of our community, but we can also feel the pain and sensitivity and anger. And sometimes it's really difficult to separate that, which is why I love that Pisces is opposite. Another archetype is opposite Virgo. And at full moon, the sun is in Virgo and the moon is in Pisces. That's what the full moon really is. And we can use that Virgo energy skillfully to discern what is me and what is not me. You know, it's not easy with Piscean archetype, but this is, I think, where the balance of opposition can come in handy, and where if we can't balance them, then that unbalance can bring obviously the shadow side of the archetype. But if we can use the Virgo assertiveness and Virgo discernment, that mercurial thinking cap on, is it me or is it not me? Is that actually what I feel, or am I absorbing that from my environment? Is that actually my rage, or is that the rage of the environment that I feel in a channel? And again, nothing wrong with that per se, is just that being aware. Is that my choice, that I connect consciously to that collective, to that something bigger, and I can draw from that or through me? Or is that just happening and I have no control and I feel overwhelmed? I mean, Piscean archetype for me sometimes, again, it's the ocean. We're talking about the symbolism of Pisces. It's the ocean, is the wave. And you can ride that wave if you're a skillful surfer, or you can drown under it. You know, like this wave that comes and just takes over, goes over your head, pulls you back, and you lose the sense of where is up, where is down.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what comes to mind when I think about Piscean full moon. It's that huge energy, that huge wave. And what do you do? Can you ride that wave? Are you skillful enough? Are you courageous enough to take the board and go and surf? Or do you not even know that it's coming because you're back to the ocean, you're chatting away, and then that the wave will come and surprise you and will knock you down and will pull you back into the depth of the waters. So yeah,
Which is
it's
beautiful, but also frightening, right? And I think this is why Pisces energy often can bring up a sense of overwhelm.
yeah,
People often talk about they're having a Piscean experience, through their birth chart or through a transit or a progression. Like they're feeling that Pisces archetypal energy, and it's like, I'm overwhelmed. And we may not even know why,
yeah,
right? Sometimes it's not about a knowing, it's much more about the emotional, the feeling, you know. I'm afraid that a wave is coming. I have that sixth sense happening. I don't know that
mhm,
I can handle it, or it's a deep emotion I'm being dragged down into that I haven't looked at in a long time. There can be so much that happens that inspires us to maybe want to embrace a little escape, right, of that
yeah,
Piscean nature, because there can be that sense of overwhelm. So I think it's important to be gentle with ourselves during Pisces lunations, and also to remember that Pisces is the sign that I associate the most with unconditional love, unconditional acceptance. When we don't have boundaries, which is so Piscean, and you mentioned that earlier, there's something about Pisces that I always think of SpongeBob SquarePants. That there's this one scene in one episode, and I mean this lovingly, no offense to any Pisces out there, right? But there's this one scene where he's all happy and life is great. And somebody, barks at him and suddenly he's sad and he's so depressed. And it's that idea of when we don't have boundaries energetically, emotionally, it is so easy to soak up like a sponge, to take in all the emotions of others around us. And it can
Yeah.
be really hard to discern what is my feeling and what is all the
Mm,
feelings I've absorbed. It can make us extremely empathic, which can be confusing and lead
yeah.
to this feeling overwhelmed. So I think it's important to practice unconditional love and acceptance for ourselves as well as others. And like you say, to bring in a little of that Virgo light about let's to break this down. What is mine? And how can I work with it in that Piscean way? And what is others? And I need to just find a way to clear, to shield, to
Mm,
shed, to ground, to let that go.
absolutely. I mean, I'm going to put the chart so we can actually look at some of the aspects that are happening. So, hey, let's have a look. So there's quite a few things happening. I believe, Kimberly, you will talk to us about Neptune being there really
Yeah.
close.
So if you're listening to us on the podcast rather than watching us on YouTube, we just pulled up the chart. Again, it's for 10 a.m. Universal Time on September 10th. And we're seeing that the sun and the moon are at 17 degrees, 41 minutes. Not far from that moon in Pisces, we've got Neptune. Neptune's hanging out at 24 degrees, which for a luminary is not that wide, not that far. And we've had Neptune in Pisces for quite some time, right? For many years now. This isn't necessarily new. It's just sort of that one more wave, using Monica's example there, that of energy of it coming up. And of course, for those who use modern, not the traditional rulers, but modern rulership, Neptune is the modern ruler of Pisces. So there's definitely some affinity, some strength here with this. And to me, Neptune is the great dissolver. Neptune,
Mm.
it dissolves everything it touches. It's like if you remember in the old timey days, we used to have sugar for our tea or our coffee was little sugar cubes. And I think of that as like that's the structure. And so if we put that in hot water, it starts to dissolve slowly. This is the not the fast and furious like we get with Uranus. This is the slow, gently dissolving away the structure, but the essence is not gone because now we have sweet water, right? It's so the sugar isn't gone, but it's changed shape, it's changed its structure in some way. And I think this really can exacerbate in a good way that idea of letting go of the boundary lines. If you've been dealing with challenges to Saturn, as we've been discussing a lot of energies with the Saturn Uranus square over the last few months. We've been discussing a lot of energies in Capricorn we've seen this year. One of the things that can happen there is we can over solidify our boundaries, we can create walls. So if you're a person who's been experiencing this, I can't seem to connect, there's a wall that I can't get past, it's like life is too rigid, there's too many boundaries. This can be great in helping us let go and dissolve and maybe release some of the boundaries. We don't necessarily need the structure we think we need. This could also be saying that we're opening up to our spirituality, we're opening up to our intuition, we're opening up to the call of trust, trusting in the what is beyond this physical world to guide us. So there's, I think, this great ability to kind of have a visioning moment, do a vision board, see things, the big picture of why my soul is here and what I'm headed to. And the flip side also can happen because it is the two fish, which is we could get lost in dream, we can over fantasize, we could not have enough structure. We can be swimming so far into those waters, we don't realize the undertow has carried us way out, and now there's no plan of how to get back. How are
Yeah.
you planning on working with this, Monica?
Um, well, I don't even know where to start. Um, for starters, the fishes, as Anna always says, fishes is quite a prominent thing in my chart. And it's always slightly hidden for me as well. So this is the energy that I think helps. And the way I see people with quite a lot of fishes, quite a lot of Piscean energy, there is this element of shape shifting. And what I mean by shape shifting, I don't mean an actual changing your shape and becoming, a wolf or a vampire or something. But we tend to shape into adjust our shape into the environment of people that we are around. So I've noticed that people with a Piscean energy, they tend to mold because they are so absorbent of the energy around them. They tend to mold themselves into what's needed of them at the time. So if you will be around people that are really aggressive and really competitive and so on, they might get that energy out of you because you soak that energy up. You become that. You're want to, and it's not this is not a being fake, or this is not being, trying to fit in because you want to have friends or something. This is just natural ability to be so sensitive to the energy around you that you naturally absorb that. Just a digression, I knew someone who had this uncanny ability to speak different accents, and it just because it had the person had amazing ear. So when that person was with Scottish people, he would just pick up the Scottish accent just like that. Or if he was with people from, let's say, Manchester, I'm based in UK, he would just speak in the same accent or as they do. And it was that uncanny ability to just mold into that. And he wasn't doing that consciously. He wasn't doing that to fit in. He just absorbed it so much that it just became a second nature to him. And I think this is where I think Neptune and the boundaries that you were talking about, dissolving the boundaries. Neptune dissolves the boundaries, which is why it's so great that it's opposing that Virgo Mercury. We need to be really careful to use that mercurial discernment and say what is me and what is not. Neptune can help dissolve the boundaries between people. And like you said, Kimberly, I love that. I agree with this as well, that this is the place of that kind of universal love. This is the archetype of that universal compassion, because the boundaries that we perceive are dissolved, and we see heart to heart. We see what's in our hearts and in our souls, and that where the love and compassion resides. When we concentrate on again the negative side of Virgo, on all those little things that we are different at, that's when we move away from love. So Neptune can help us dissolve the boundaries and see into people's souls, but it also can help us dissolve our own boundaries, which can be dangerous, because the question is then, well, who am I? If I fit in so well with this group and this group and this group, who I am is important. So I think that in the light of full moon, especially with the chart that's happening here, the way I will be working with this is very much revising my plans. Surprisingly or not surprisingly, I will actually be away by the sea, and I'm planning to revise my dreams, everything that I've built until this year, everything that I've planned and I've worked on. I'm going to revising that. I'm going to looking at that. I'm going to look at what is still my dream, or where did I get caught maybe in someone else's dream or someone else's fantasy. Where is my boundary dissolved so much that I'm stepping into someone else's dream and reenacting a role that is not really fit for me. So I am going to be journaling on that, and I'm going to be working with that dreamy archetype and trying to reconnect with my spiritual center and trying to reconnect with my dream, to see what I need to do. It's also a time when the sun is in Virgo, like we said, it's the opposing. So it's the time of, where the harvest begins, where we work somewhere for from the beginning of the year. We created our vision. We work through with that, spring equinox energy to build something. And now it's time to actually take a stock a little bit. So that is my plan for this full moon.
Beautiful. Well, before we move into the rest of the chart and kind of
Mm.
flesh out other things that are happening, do you mind go ahead and not and stop the share so those following us on a phone can actually see us, and of course everyone else can rewind if they need to see the chart. There we go. I love seeing your beautiful face. All right. So how about the contacts happening between the moon and the nodes in Uranus?
Hmm. Well, this is another one, isn't it? We've been talking about the nodes, well, for the whole year. The nodes are important, and they've been making quite significant aspects this year. So nodes, just to remind everyone, nodes are in Taurus and in Scorpio. They obviously are opposing one another, and they will be sextiling and trining the moon. So for me, when the nodes are actually connected with the luminaries, we're not only talking about the luminaries, the two lights of the horoscope, the moon and the sun, lighting up that horoscope and bringing that that light again into our lives, but we're also talking about the path of destiny. I love how in astrology everything is so big, those words, but it is, the nodes are effectively the path of destiny for us individually and for us as a collective. And this full moon will be, in my opinion, will be talking to that, will be speaking with the collective, will be speaking with the destiny and where we're going and what we need to lose or dissolve, to quote Kimberly. And I think it will be interesting because when new moon or full moon touches the nodes, it brings something even bigger. It's not just the energy of the month that comes to a peak. It's not just the energy of the archetype that peaks. It brings that destiny line into view and says, okay, how can I highlight that as well? So we have Piscean moon close with the Neptune that dissolve certain things, and we're bringing Taurian and Scorpionic themes into that as well. So yeah, the way I think about it, there might be a bit of this dissolution or disappointment, because Neptune can actually not only dissolve things in a positive way, but also disappoint. It's the kind of the dissolution of the dream that we had, and that can be linked to Taurian things, to our security, to our land, to Scorpionic things, to that taboo. So there might be a dissolution of some taboo things for us. There might be a disappointment around places that we felt safe and secure and maybe no longer do. But it also speaks to, this is the energy of dreaming big, and redreaming or re-envisioning things. So maybe we can actually use that energy to put it into the Taurian and Scorpio and say, okay, well, what does it mean for me to be safe? And how can I use that Piscean collective energy to see that it's not just me, it's actually collective that I want to make sure that feels safe. It's not just me that feels uncomfortable, or there are certain aspects of my life that are taboo, but how can I bring that into collective and shine the light and make the collective understand that and accept that and love that as well.
That's so beautiful. Yeah, I love that. I also think this is a great time for doing some, whether it's intentional or it's totally unconscious, for doing some cord cutting. We've talked a lot over the last few months about the energy of the North and South node in the Taurus and Scorpio axis, right? And a lot of the conversation we've had and the different transits that keep contacting it, especially, Uranus hanging so close to that South node as it goes through Taurus. This, what is it that I want to move towards? What is it I'm striving towards? And what is the fear that stops me from doing it? What is the safety net that I'm afraid to, take down, to cut? And that so many people are looking at, they have a dream, they have a vision, or they are yearning for something else, but that but We hold on, we want to be able to do the new and still feel safe. And sometimes that's not possible, right? That we have to let go of the safety net in order to move forward sometimes. And this nodal axis can certainly bring that up. So I feel that the fact that we're dealing with beautiful trine and sextile here to the different nodes, well, maybe this means that some of that seeing the bigger vision can give us the motivation we need to keep moving forward. Maybe some of that Piscean energy of trusting spirit is guiding me rather than I am guiding me, learning to trust our heart space rather than our mind space might help us there. And also, just this idea of dissolving, do I really need the structure that I think I need? Do I still need, or do I need something else? Do I need a structure or do I need this structure? And so this might be a great time of really letting go that last little thing that I'm holding on to that is holding me back in some way from moving into where that North Node wants to be taking me.
I like that. I like that a lot. And actually, you just reminded me of something as well. Um, with the dreams, and I've talked about that probably so much already on the previous episodes, but with dreams, we tend to hold on to them, and we tend to be so hung up on certain dreams that we had, especially if they were dreams from where we were, younger. Um, and unfortunately, with the Taurus and Scorpio, with the fixed signs, we can be fixated on the dream. We can use that energy to dissolve the dream. Not all the dreams need to be carried forward. And I probably share some examples in previous episodes already. But we outgrow our dreams, and we don't tend to talk about that very much. We don't tend to talk about dreams that we have, or plans that we actually outgrow them. And we do. And this is the time, and this is why I love astrology. It gives us the time and space to reflect and reconnect and, revise what is still that we need to carry forward. And this is for me actually part of living and being connected to the cycles. But we do outgrow our dreams. If I wanted to be a ballerina when I was 3 or 4 years old, maybe it's still a dream, but maybe it needs to be adjusted. Maybe actually I no longer want to be in ballerina shoes or in tutu. But actually what that dream really represented for me, it's flow with the music. And now when I'm, I don't know, 30, 40, 50, actually what I really want to do is find the beautiful, salsa classes on Saturday when I can just flow with the music, because the dream, it wasn't about being the ballerina and being on stage. The dream might have been just expressing the music and the flow through my body. So sometimes we don't actually revise our dreams and say, okay, what does that mean? Sometimes we feel, again, the Neptune can bring that melancholy. Oh, it's too late for me. The amount of time I've heard from people, and I'm not saying people in their 60s or 70s, in people in their like late 20s or 30s. Oh, it's too late for me to follow the dream. What does that mean? Again, there might be sometimes too late for certain dreams, right? If I want to be an next Usain Bolt, but I haven't run a mile in my life, well, it might be a bit too late. The athletes have this kind of 30-year and then they retire because their body gets so tired. So it might be too late to do that. But was my dream to get the gold at the Olympics, or just to, run? And I can start that even in my 60s. I used to work with this amazing woman who started running marathons in her 60s. And I admired her for that. But this is it, like Neptune can bring us melancholy and depression where we hold on to the dream that is no longer valid. And I think those nodes as well can just give us the reset of the direction. I don't know how you feel about that, Kimberly, but I think it's like, sometimes we need to dissolve something and build something else. We're not holding on to that sugar cube. We just want that sweet water. But without that dissolution, we're not going to get that water. So what is
Yes.
it that we can dissolve that will help us build a different dream?
And Uranus is right there. So quite frankly, if we're
Mhm.
not going to allow things to dissolve, it will be taken from us, or change will come that forces it, right? I mean, Uranus does not necessarily, I feel like Neptune works with us with the kid gloves. Uranus takes
Yeah,
off the gloves and says, come on, and
yeah.
so I feel like it is the time for change, and
Yeah.
change of that kind of karmic nature is difficult, and it is hard, and it can take time and repetition. We do 3 steps forward, 2 steps back a lot of the time. That's okay, that's
Mm,
part of the human experience, but this is saying it's time to make that final change
yeah,
that we are afraid of. The time is now. So
yeah.
I love how you put that. That makes so much sense.
I like that you're bringing Uranus because it's still hanging there with Saturn. And again, you can look at our previous episode when we're talking about Uranus and Saturn. It's this kind of tension between something old versus something new. um and sometimes you need, both. This is the beautiful thing about, getting married and having a contract with someone, the whole idea of getting something old, something new, something borrowed, something blue. But there's something old and something new. You're creating something from both.
Mhm.
You can't disregard the tradition, but also you can't live if that tradition's getting fossilized. So it's that beautiful balance between that. And I think, again, I agree, Kimberly, we are getting, and we've talked about it in a previous episode, we're getting into interesting part of the year. And we have eclipses around the corner, which we'll be talking about in a previous episodes. So this is the time to prepare. And another lovely astrological aspect can help us with that. Mercury will be going backwards or
Well,
retrograde.
retrograde. Yeah, retrograde, right?
Yeah.
The illusion of going backwards in the sky. I I both relish and have a little of that bit of apprehension with every Mercury retrograde. I think it's a great time to revisit and review, and so lots of what we've already been discussing today is like it's a good time to have that
Mhm.
Mercury retrograde. We talked in our last episode a little bit about the pre-shadow that we're already in, when you're having those um, your Mercury's going over some of the degrees that the retrograde will be in. So you're kind of getting that foreshadowing effect. And we're going to see the actual retrograde itself at 8 degrees of Libra starts on September 9th, like within hours of the full moon. So this adds another layer, I think, to that full moon energy of it's a Mercury retrograde initiation time. It'll be retrograde from September 9th to October 2nd, with a going backwards through the signs. It starts off retrograde in Libra, as I said, at 8 degrees, and on September 24th, it'll go back into the tail last few degrees of Virgo before it goes direct. So if you've got anything in the, last 5 degrees of Virgo, the first 8 degrees of Libra, you might want to be paying attention to how this is impacting your own natal birth chart. And as you mentioned earlier when we were talking before the show, Monica, this also will be making an opposition to Jupiter. If you remember the chart we had up, we had Jupiter hanging out in Aries, right? And so we're going to see some tension brought in there. So let's break this down, right? I had a great conversation with a friend the other day who was telling me how she's having all this awareness pop lately as she's doing meditations and working with her tarot cards. Everything's popping for her about how she needs to embrace, more forgiveness and acceptance of herself and others. And she's like, oh, it's Mercury retrograde because I'm having these revelations. I'm like, no, we're in the pre-shadow. So perhaps these revelations that are beautiful are going to actually be tested with individual people in specific scenarios during that retrograde. And then after the retrograde, during the, those 2 weeks after the retrograde, during that post shadow, we can have the
Yeah.
final pulling it together, resolution kind of going forward. She's like,
Yeah.
oh, so I'm not just done with it. I'm like, no. So this is, in other words, this is a great time to pay attention to what's happening in your life that has a very mercurial theme to it. For me, it's all about technology, everything about technology. So I'm kind of getting the sense that, all right, this might be some of my lessons during the Mercury retrograde. For somebody else, it could be communication. For somebody else, it might be local travel. So it might be siblings. So if you think about some of the prime archetypal meanings behind Mercury and start looking to see are any of them starting to kind of ping in your world, it can really be useful during the pre-shadow to get a sense. But by the time you're hearing this podcast, we're now there, right? We're going to be in the new moon and the retrogrades happening. And our retrogrades happening in Libra and then back, which is an air sign, and then it will back up into Virgo and earth sign. And we're seeing that this year, right? This year we're in that year of transition. Some years all of your retrogrades are in one element. And some years they start off in one element and they back up to the other one. So to me, when we're dealing with this idea of it starting off in air and backing up into earth, there's something here about what is happening with my mind, with my thoughts, with my ideas, and how am I going to give them a foundation? You know, it's different, but it kind of echoes for me something similar to what we were just talking about with the difference between Saturn and Uranus, right? This idea of I may have lots of thoughts on lots of things, but I can't necessarily do all the multitasking that my brain envisions. So sometimes we have to slow down and back up and think, how do I give some practicality? Thinking of the Virgo, how do I get productive? How am I going to make things happen? You know, this could be the idea of having to prioritize. I have lots of ideas. What is the top priority? Or maybe I have lots of conversations. Being in Libra, maybe I have lots of relationships. This might be the time of having to back up and discern which ones do I need to give more time and attention to, and which ones is it maybe time to send some love and light, but let go, or broaden the distance, cut some of those strings. Yeah, I could go on and on about Mercury retrograde. Monica knows I'm very much a mercurial woman. So I'll stop there. I think that's enough to chew on. But Monica, why don't you throw in your 2 cents about what you see with this retrograde?
I mean, I love that we're bringing the shadow and post shadow, because I think, again, very often we just concentrate on that retrograde cycle. And that's the cycle when things go wrong, or we need to revise or go back, but actually we don't see the whole cycle. And for me, the whole cycle, Kimberly, like you were just saying, is the whole, you know, it starts with the pre-shadow, because Mercury is going through already the road that it will then go back through. And then the post shadow, it will go again. So Mercury is already, you know, already been in Virgo from 24 degrees. It's going all the way to Libra, and then it will stop there, then go back, which is the typical retrograde cycle. And then it will stop in Virgo and will go forward again, all the way until Libra and beyond, 8th of Libra and beyond. And I do think that when you look at the whole cycle, it's kind of like those magical threes, you know, that things happen in threes, or you have three hit to something with retrograde. For me, retrograde is not just that moment when the planet stops and go, you know, backwards, so to speak. This is just one moment. For me, the whole cycle is when the planet goes and hits a point in my chart, and then it goes back over that point, pointing out that I haven't seen something, or I've missed something, or I didn't pay enough attention, and then it goes forward again just to make sure that I have. This is kind of like, you know,
Yeah.
going to school, which is so, again, Mercury is linked with schools and teaching. But this is like going to school, you know, you're learning a subject, then you have to revise, and then you have exam to make sure that you actually revise correctly. And this is kind of what Mercury is trying to do. So I always pay attention to a pre-shadow, because those, like your colleague, those are the themes that we will be revisiting. So for her, it might not be anything about emails or, you know, laptops breaking down, or backup copies not being done. But for her, it might be about, okay, well, you have those downloads about letting go and kind of be more compassionate and so on. Let's test it. Here is the person that you really, really, really don't like and can't stand, and they crawl under your skin. What do you do? Have you learned that lesson? So this is interesting. Mercury for me in Libra and Virgo, it's very much about communicating within the relationships.
Mhm.
And it's interesting between those two archetypes. So we're talking about communication in Libra with our loved ones, with the relationships that we have. How do we communicate? What kind of cooperations we have with those relations? Not necessarily with our partner, husband, wife, but even in like with our boss, with our co-workers, what relationships we have, how do we communicate with them? And then when we step back into Virgo, it's this kind of using Mercury to rethink, am I of service or am I in servitude to those relationships? Which one, like Kimberly just mentioned, which of those relationships do I need to dissolve and let go of because they don't serve me anymore? Um,
Exactly. Yeah.
so we touched on that a little bit in a previous episode because again, the new moon started the whole pre-shadow cycle. So if you want to know more about the Mercury, please go to our previous episode. But this is very much, Mercury is trying to teach us something about our relationships. How do we approach them? How do we communicate them? How do we give of ourselves in them? Do we do that in a healthy way? Going back to Virgo, do we do that in a healthy way? Are we do we have healthy relationships or do we have toxic relationships? And what can we do to heal them? So I think there will be a lot of that. I think Mercury in Libra tends to bring people from the past. Um,
Oh,
yeah, I've noticed that, especially maybe it's just for me. It's where the Libra is in my chart. But I've noticed that it's the girlfriend from high school that I haven't heard in like 15 years, and suddenly is dropping me a Facebook message, or is my work colleague that we haven't worked for 5 years dropping me a text to see how I am. So it's the people from the past, and it always brings something to the surface that I need to reflect. Again, all those mercurial words, right? Reflect, reconsider, revise, rethink. This is what I'm planning to do on my holidays. I'm planning to use that Piscean and mercurial energy to redream, to rethink, to reevaluate, and see how that will go.
awesome. And I also think when I'm looking at Mercury transits, I like to see what Uranus is doing. So Uranus is
Mhm.
often considered the higher vibration of Mercury, right? And so if we, as we've already mentioned, if we're dealing with Uranus, planet of change and great awakener, excuse me, in Taurus, right? And all of the things that's so Uranian, and it's making that square to on and off again and on again and on again to Saturn. We're dealing with the fixed signs, the what is it that I hold on to? What is my tradition? What is my foundation versus what do I want to change? Where does my freedom come? Where am I moving towards? It seems to me that this Mercury retrograde will have some echoes of that as well. So perhaps some of the awareness we have about what Mercury retrograde is bringing into our lives during its, 3 weeks to 9 weeks, depending on whether you work with the pre and post shadows. I say 9 weeks, but it's 3 weeks of the retrograde. What is it bringing into your life? Chances are it has some connection or some echo to what is it also we need to change. And so I'm approaching this particular one with this idea, and I'll save more of my thoughts for when we get to our tips. But I also want to throw out that not only is Uranus and Saturn continuing to square, and we're seeing that energy go on, but now we have the asteroid Ceres has moved far enough along that she is opposing Saturn. So effectively making a T square, if you consider asteroids to be a T square. And so I just kind of want to throw in, to me, this says something about what do we need to bring some nurturing to? What do we need to maybe, where do we need to address our inner parent and do some maybe adulting if she's opposing that, opposing Saturn? But if she's squaring that Uranus, then well, what do I need to nurture so that I feel comfortable. I mean, when we were children, the first time we learned to walk, somebody's holding our hand and encouraging us and telling us we can do it. We don't just suddenly, most of us don't suddenly go from crawling to walking and boom, we're done. It's a process. And you're constantly looking and, okay, you got me. Or when you first learn to ride your bicycle and they take off the training wheels, it's like, you got me, right? You got me. So maybe looking at how we can do that for ourselves, how our inner parent can help support and nurture and encourage us to make the changes Uranus is calling for, which I think we might get a little more clarity about what those changes are about during this retrograde. We'll see.
That's lovely. That's lovely. I agree with that. I don't work very much with Ceres, but I see that opposition to Saturn and that square to Uranus. It's adding that feminine energy. It's adding that between the Saturn and Uranus, those two giants fighting between the old and the new, between the old systems and structures and the revolution. Suddenly we have this force and energy of, well, what about the earth? What about the abundance the earth gives us? How do we treat that? How do we treat our land? Do we take it as a commodity? Do we trying to create something new? So do we structure and treat that as a commodity, Saturn? Or do we trying to change something and revolutionize and create a new crop, or genetically modify something? That would be very much Uranus. But Earth on its own, she is already abundant. Do we actually need to go into that Saturn Uranus energy, or can we bring that feminine understanding of, hey, there is enough for all of us? There's a beautiful quote that someone said, and I don't remember who said that, but it's stuck in my head for years, that there is enough for our needs, there is not enough for our greed. And there is something about Ceres for me, that she brings the abundance, but when that is raped, taken away, the whole myth of her daughter being taken from her, when that is being abused, she says enough. And that can bring even the highest gods to their knees. Go back and look at Ceres mythology, and this is beautiful, gentle energy of that kind of abundant Mother Earth. But do not mistake the gentleness for weakness. And I think this is something that we do a lot in our society, when we mistake the gentleness and the kindness for weakness. It's not, and it can turn really quick. And we see that in our world. I mean, there is a typhoon coming out to Japan. There is a volcano erupting in Iceland. There are floods, I believe, in US. Like, Earth can be a dangerous place. It can damage things. There's drought in Europe, and we're talking about, both in UK and across Europe, about losing crops that we need to survive the winter. So Earth can give a lot, but when we abuse, when we overdo, she can say no more. And I think this is the energy on a grand scale. This is obviously what we're dealing with, but also within our own lives, when we bring that into the microcosm of our own souls. Where do we stuck to a patriarchal mindset, that kind of mindset that we were brought up with, and that's the truth and the holy truth and the only truth, because we grew up in that structure? Where is it when we're so revolutionary that we just want to destroy everything without thinking it through? That's very Uranian, like, I'm going to destroy the system without actually thinking through what's next. I'm not saying that the system is good or bad, and I'm not saying that, destroying it or not destroying, is good or bad, but we can't just do that and not have a plan of how we then deal with that energy. And Ceres can bring certain answers. So she brings a different different energy to the table. And she says, okay, have you considered the land? Have you considered people who are closer to the land? They might have answers. You know, we keep thinking that we can revolutionize something. Do we? Or we already have answers locked with people who are close to the land, locked with, you know, religious and spirituality that is already there, just never really considered, never really elevated in the Western society, in a society that, you know, is a society of patriarchal colonial history. And maybe, you know, with Sarah's, we need to go back and say, hey, maybe we already have those answers. We just need to
Love
look
that.
at that. So
That's a
didn't
great,
plan to go there.
a great final note. I love that. That is very uplifting and inspiring and something to think about for sure. Well, before we
So,
go, how about some parting tips and tricks
so
as
for
we often
me,
do?
yeah, so for me, it will be very much going back to that full moon that we were just talking, and maybe spending some time with Mercury going into a retrograde, with some time with your journal, with your pen, and dream with your journal, with your pen, put the dream on the paper and try to use that mercurial energy that you have in your chart to discern, is it my dream or is it fantasy? This sounds like a song, isn't it? It sounds like a song title. But think about it, reflect on that, journal on that. Is that the dream that inspires me, that it feeds my soul, that it's actually uplifting? Or is it a fantasy that helped me escape something? And how do I deal with that? What do I need to dissolve then? What dreams or fantasies no longer serve me? And what uplift me and creating that sweetness in my life? So that would be
Nice.
my suggestion. That's what I'll be doing at the full moon.
I'll be doing something similar, but a slightly different take on it. So it's a two-parter. The first part is create a vision board. Whenever we're dealing with extreme Pisces energy, I feel it's the perfect time to get out of the head, to leave words behind momentarily. Let's get into images, cut out magazines and do a collage, or get your pens and paper and make it imagery, right? What is the vision that calls me, that motivates me? What is it that I'm yearning for in the months ahead? And then after we've done that and felt that and been one with that and experienced that full moon, then the next part is, now let's embrace some of that Mercury retrograde. Looking at that dream, what do I have to change to make that dream a reality? What is the change that I need to embrace or work towards? And perhaps at this point, do some journaling, do some reflecting, think about, what do I need to revise? And is that change something I'm willing to make? Quite often there's a vision of what I want, a change that's required, and I'm not ready. And that's
Mm,
okay, because there may be very practical reasons that I'm not ready, or it could be fear that's stopping me. Like, that's going to require, I think, some reflection to really get clear about. But my hunch would be that when we look at the vision, there are changes we need to make, and maybe we could start making small changes towards that bigger change. So that's
I
kind of
really like that.
embracing my Uranus, Mercury retrograde, full moon in Pisces combo.
I really like that. It's just as a disclaimer, please do remember that it is Mercury retrograde, so maybe those changes need to wait until you come out of that. Do not rush, because this is another thing that I think Mercury teaches with those 3 hits. It teaches us that we might think we got it, we like, yeah, I've sorted it out, and then the next hit comes in, and it's like, oh, there's another layer to it. So don't rush through that. Make it build, use that beautiful Mercury retrograde energy to help you go deeper and deeper and deeper as it goes 3 times. And then you can make a move. There's no, there's no, nothing stopping you from planning and making those steps on your plan. But I bet when there will be, again, Mercury going forward, those steps might change, or there might be a deeper meaning to them, or something else. So that's a
Yeah.
disclaimer. Let's not rush with Mercury retro. Let's allow ourselves a bit of time to step back. And I'm going to do that actually for myself as well before I go head straight into something new.
Yes, good time to revise, not necessarily the best time to launch into new action until after we've gone direct. Good reminder. Well, that brings us to a close. Thank you so much for joining us. Look forward to hearing or reading your comments about how Mercury retrograde is working for you, or is Pisces lunation something you enjoy every year? Whatever you feel like sharing. I always learn, as I know my colleagues do, from your comments and your thoughts and your wisdom. Don't forget to hit that like button or to subscribe. And if you follow us, you will get a reminder from YouTube in 2 weeks when we're back talking about the next new moon. So have a good 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you for joining us in this week's Astro Chat. We hope that you enjoyed the discussion and would love to hear about anything that resonated with you. Keep the conversation going by posting shareable content on our Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube pages. You can also email us at astrochatpodcast@gmail.com. AstroChat is uploaded every 2 weeks on the Saturday before each new and full moon. Look for us on your favorite podcast platform as well as on YouTube. You can support AstroChat and receive exclusive content by donating on our Patreon page. We look forward to chatting with you all again at the next lunation of the moon.